Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Brooke Ashley, and today we are here to discuss the salacious tell-all, Not All Diamonds and Rosé by Dave Quinn. I feel like this book is a must for every Real Housewives lover. This is over 400 pages of just absolute tea. Like, I got my entire life just reading it. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to discuss every single thing. I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the book, and you're going to have to read it for yourself if you have not already, because it is a fabulous read. I will say that after reading the book, I felt a sort of sadness for the vast majority of these women. They've really made this newfound fame in being on the show their identity. And for the ones who are fired, the ones who quit, there's a sense of bitterness, there's a sense of anger that they're not on the show. While the vast majority of housewives did speak to the author and gave their 2 cents about things, there were quite a few who didn't. Nene Leakes refused, Kim Zolciak refused, Bethany Frankel, and quite a few others didn't want to speak to this author to get a quote. But for the most part, everyone else did. And again, it's a fabulous read. So, with all that being said, let's just jump right on into it because we don't have a minute to spare. The book starts off in chronological order, so the first chapter is Orange County. Orange County premiered in 2006, and I was right there, okay? As a teenager, honey, I was sitting there glued, watching Lori, Vicki Gunvalson, Gina, Tamra, everybody. So we find out that OC, nobody really had much hope for the show. Andy Cohen thought it was a weird concept. He wasn't really feeling it, and he never thought in a million years that OC would form other franchises. He thought that this would be a one and done. But anyhow, OC was originally supposed to be called Behind the Gates, but then they felt like the name was too serious, so then they were thinking, let's call it something else. So because Desperate Housewives was on at the time and the OC, those were the 2 hottest shows on TV, they said, well, why not combine the 2 names? And that's how the Real Housewives of OC came to be as the title. Now, Andy thought that the title was too long and he wasn't liking it. But again, it's just so funny how you never know how something's going to blow up and just really take off. We find out some little tea that Andy was really attracted to Slade. Remember Slade? He was in the earlier seasons of OC. He was Joe's boyfriend / fiance in seasons 1 and 2. Then when they broke up, he got with Gretchen. And yeah, I was really laughing at the fact that Andy had a crush on Slade. But finding out that Slade was super fame hungry and he was trying to be on TV by any means necessary. Joe is in the book and she says that, yeah, Slade for the most part was like really pressuring her to join the show. And the rest is history. We also learned from producers that they pursued Kobe Bryant's wife every single year, and she turned them down repeatedly because she wanted no parts. And I don't even think that she would have been a good fit on the show anyhow. I just feel like the wealth that she has, she's in a different tier, a different category. So yeah, that wouldn't have worked. The ratings for OC in the early seasons were pretty solid. Not like groundbreaking through the roof, but they were pretty solid. But it's just really funny because the whole tone of OC is it's the first one, and nobody had any idea that it would be this explosive phenomenon that we know it to be today. I just found it to be very hilarious that when you get towards the end of this chapter, Vicki and Tamra both have some bitterness about being fired. And, you know, they talk a lot about the firing process. The producer will call you up, and when you get the call, you know that you're being fired. And Vicki ending off the chapter by saying that she gave, 15 years to this show, and to be off of it, it's like a slap in the face. But it's like at the same time, she should be grateful, but she's not. It just kind of made me sad. Like, girl, really? You know, you can't be grateful again for the time that you had on. The second chapter is New York, and as you know, that New York is the second franchise, and they premiered in March of 2008. The New York premiere debuted to some really strong ratings, and they were a big success. Bravo was very happy. It was originally supposed to be called Manhattan Moms, but when Andy saw these characters, he said, you know what, let's make it another Housewives franchise, and here we are today. We already know that Jill Zarin pretty much put the cast of New York together. Jill Zarin was very desperate to be famous by any means possible. She admits it in the book. Honey, she got herself a Bentley. She was there name dropping all the celebrities that she knew. She was playing up how much money she had, like she wanted it. Another fun fact, Sonia Morgan was also cast to be on for season 1. And I remember Sonia saying that repeatedly in interviews, but we find out that the reason why she ended up dropping out of season 1 was because she was still in the middle of an awful divorce with her now ex-husband, who's J.P. Morgan's grandson. We find out that Miss Bethany Frankel originally did not want to be on the show. She thought that she wouldn't be a good fit because she wasn't a mom, she didn't have all this money, and she had just been on reality TV like the year before. Bethany was on Martha Stewart's Apprentice, where she had lost. She was second runner-up. And so that's why she was kind of scarred and didn't want anything to do with reality TV. So Jill Zarin and her husband kept pressuring her to be on the show. And then when she sent in her audition tape, she kind of froze up. She just wasn't like the witty person that we know today. And Andy wasn't feeling her at all. So Andy says that had he not cast Bethany on the show, that would have been one of his biggest career mistakes ever. And he's so happy that he changed his mind and had her on because, let's just keep it real, Bethany made New York. Like, I still want Bethany to come back on the show, if we're being really honest. There's a lot of discussion about how Jill felt when Bethany no longer wanted to be friends with her. And again, I feel like Jill's making excuses even in the book. It's like, sis, you started the whole thing. Bethany was trying to reach out to you. She was being a good friend to you. And you were trying to be really nasty and being an ice queen. And it all backfired. And the viewers ended up hating you for it. And you ended up losing out on a best friend because of it. A common theme that's discussed in pretty much every chapter amongst all the franchises, there's always a standout in every franchise, and when that happens, there is a lot of jealousy 9 times out of 10 on the other cast members' parts. Because Bethany was the breakout star of New York, a lot of the women, especially Jill, became very jealous that Bethany was taking center stage. Jill does admit that she became very jealous. She was really upset when Bethany, I think, was on like Jimmy Fallon or one of the shows, and she wasn't. And it's like, again, there's always going to be that person that's just that girl. Like, again, why can't you be happy to be on the show? That's a huge blessing in itself. So if you aren't the number one person on your franchise, that's not the worst thing in the world. I can think of a million other things that you could cry about. But it is sad to know that a lot of jealousy really does eat these women up each and every time. There was a lot of talk in the book about how Bethany would just refuse to film scenes. And when they're doing these shows, they need everybody to be on board and to do their jobs. And a lot of the other women complained that there was a lot of favoritism on the show. Like, the producers would let Bethany slide if she didn't feel like filming a scene, whereas they didn't get that kind of leeway to do that. Like, they had to be there. But Bethany got to pick and choose if she didn't want to go to an event. And they said that she did that constantly. Now, if you're an OG New York watcher, then you know that there were a lot of times where Bethany just wouldn't go to somebody's event because she didn't feel like it. Andy says that it's not that there was favoritism with Bethany. It's just that when Bethany would film, she would really do her job. Like, she would always do a really great job with her scenes. Like, she was excellent. So that's why they gave her a little bit more wiggle room to be like, you know what, I don't feel like going. But I still feel like that's not fair. If everybody has to commit and work these 16-hour days, then she has to too. Whether or not she's a star player or not. Like, girl, you signed up to get these checks and do this job like the rest of us. But I guess that's what happens when you're the star of the show, child. Kelly Ben-Simone, who is on for 2 seasons, she's in the book. She's still talking crazy. That woman was a straight up nut. And the jealousy and anger that she had for Bethany was just absolutely, it was nothing like I had ever seen before. But she's still talking about Bethany in the book, still bad-mouthing her. I said, baby, you need to get some help. And she's still not taking any ownership over her awful behavior when they were in St. John. Remember that trip dubbed Scary Island? Yeah, they talk about all that in there. Also in this chapter, we find out that Andy and Carol Radziwill are no longer friends. They don't speak. After she wasn't asked back after the season 10 reunion, she sent Andy an email saying, you know, don't ever speak to me ever again. And Andy said he did just that. He goes on to say how sad he is about the dissolution of their friendship because he really considered her a friend. Again, it's just a very interesting dynamic with the women and this show. On one end, they love it. They love all the perks that it brings them. On the other end, they hate it. They hate the network. They hate Andy. It's just a mess. It's like a very toxic relationship. Like they can't seem to get out of it, but they want back in. It's crazy. We end the chapter with Dorinda discussing her departure and how Bravo was like, you know what, sis, this isn't a goodbye, it's a see you later. I think you need to take some time off this show and then come back when you're ready. But remember, Dorinda's last season, she was very bitter, just going through a lot. She was really nasty to Tinsley, and the producers discussed that whole debacle and how she was coming off. And again, the producers get very close to these women and they do start to advise them, like, you do know that this is going to look really bad when this plays on TV, right? I think you might want to stop getting on this person so bad because you're going to look bad. But, you know, Dorinda, for the most part, does own up to her poor behavior her final season. And you can tell that Dorinda is definitely going to come back because she really did like being a housewife, like they all do. But I digress. So now we move on over to the third installment, which is the iconic Real Housewives of Atlanta that premiered in October of 2008. And baby, Atlanta was a hit from the beginning. We find out that the original title of Atlanta was supposed to be called Ladies of Hotlanta. And the show was produced and sent to Bravo by a woman named Princess. Nene Leakes was at the center of it all from the very beginning, and Andy loved her. He says in the book that he knew that Nene was the standout. It was no contest, like she was it. So a really interesting tidbit, we find out that Nene was a realtor. Now, on all Nene's time on Real Housewives of Atlanta, we never knew anything about her being a real estate agent. When Nene got on that show, she said that she was a housewife and Greg was a real estate developer. We also learned that Deshawn Snow, who was only on for that first season and first season only, she was in real estate and that's how they knew each other. The way Sheree Whitfield dominated this Atlanta chapter, and the sad part is Sheree's jealousy of Nene really reared its ugly head all throughout the chapter. The constant shade, the constant digs towards Nene about how broke Nene used to be. It's like, sis, you really are upset at the fact that Nene is the star of Atlanta and you kept getting fired. It really eats you alive that the girl that you look down on is now doing better than you financially. Like, it really just burns you up inside. You really can't seem to give Nene her props, can you? I thought it was interesting to find out that Andy Cohen was not feeling Kim Zolciak at all. He was confused about her being in this group, and he thought that she was tacky and wasn't living an upscale or rich lifestyle. So that's why he was really confused. I said the shade of it all, because Kim just knew that she was that girl, and she acted like she just has so much money since she was with Big Papa at the time. You couldn't tell her anything. So it's just so funny to hear that Andy was not feeling her. He did not think that she was that girl whatsoever with that cheap Party City wig on her head. But I digress. Sheree reveals in this chapter that Kim and NeNe have fallen out and hadn't talked for years until the show aired. So the whole thing about them being the best of friends and just loving on each other, honey, that was all a lie, and they had just got back cool because of the show. Then we find out the reason why Kim and NeNe have fallen out in the first place is because Kim was dating another Big Papa type, and when they broke up, he kicked Kim out the house, and then NeNe went behind her back and tried to become her now ex-boyfriend's realtor, because since he lived in a mansion, she wanted the sale. So that's why they have fallen out and hadn't spoken for years. But NeNe actually recommended Kim despite them not getting along, and she told Princess that Kim would be a great addition to the show. We learn a lot about Carlos King in this chapter. He was an associate producer, and he was assigned to be NeNe's producer. He says that it was love at first sight between he and NeNe, and they got along amazing. And so he says that he knew from the jump that NeNe was going to be the star of the show. Sheree, of course, with her bitter self, says that she told Carlos before the show even aired that he had created a monster because she already knew that NeNe's head was going to blow up. I said, Sheree, again, there's that jealousy because the word on the street is the show was actually supposed to be centered around you. They had it set up so that you were going to be the queen bee socialite of Atlanta. And when we all saw how delusional and how broke you really were, we were like, absolutely not. And plus, your attitude was so nasty and pretentious, none of us liked it. So your jealousy about NeNe being the breakout star, it's like, girl, just take the L and move on. Like, just come to grips with the fact that while you might have been that girl before the cameras were rolling, you weren't that girl on Real Housewives of Atlanta. Deal with it. It is what it is. Sheree also says in this chapter that NeNe's personality is all fake. It's all a put on for the camera. I said, you can't fake that. Like, you can only fake but so much. NeNe does not scream anybody's wallflower or shrinking violet. They definitely throw shade at Sheree and that fashion show with no fashions. How dreadful. I was screaming. We find out that Big Papa is this super short dude. I had this complete different idea of him. All the ladies in the book reveal that they've met Big Papa. Andy says that he was disappointed when he met Big Papa because he was expecting somebody totally different in his mind, but he thought that it was just really interesting that she would call him Big Papa when he's the exact opposite. Deshawn Snow says that she would have loved to have come back for a season 2 and how she did not quit. They just fired her. She does seem to be a good sport about it. She says she understands because she wasn't interesting that first season. And looking back on it, if she were a producer, she wouldn't have rehired herself either. So it is good that she seems to be taking it all in stride. She says that she still watches the show and she's still a very big fan of the show too. I personally didn't like Deshawn. I thought that she was very pretentious, extremely tacky. The constant talk about how much money she had, it was very embarrassing, very gauche, and I just said enough. Cynthia Bailey, who joined the show in season 3, reveals that when she shot the entire season, she had no idea if she was going to be a friend of or a full-time cast member. She says that the producers told her that it was up in the air and she wouldn't know until the whole entire season was filmed. Cynthia also reveals all the money problems that her and Peter were going through that season. She says that it was even worse than what we saw, okay? And she says that Bravo only contributed $10,000 to $15,000 towards her wedding, and it was really for lighting. But she says that they were struggling so bad, she couldn't even afford to pay the wedding planner. And so she said that she ended up paying him like years later when she was getting the bigger Bravo checks. And she said that it was the happiest day in her life because she did not want that debt over her head. Carlos King says that when Kenya joined the show in season 5, he knew that she was ratings gold and he absolutely loved her. Kenya clears up the misconception about the season 6 reunion when Portia laid hands on her. Remember that? That was a mess. But Kenya says that that bullhorn and scepter was not to taunt Portia. It was actually to taunt NeNe, because NeNe kept saying that she was the queen of Atlanta and she was being super nasty to Kenya. Obviously, all the producers discussed the fight between Kenya and Portia and how that affected things and how it also affected things going forward for the next season. Portia was also one of the housewives who chose not to say anything or give a comment to the book. Another fun fact, we find out that Claudia Jordan was only supposed to be a friend of the show when she was on season 7. The reason why she became a full-time cast member was because of her infamous fight in Puerto Rico when she read NeNe down, okay? And she admits that NeNe told producers, y'all got the wrong one. Claudia needs to be full-time and Demetria needs to be a friend of. Remember Demetria? She was dating Roger Bob, and she was supposed to be full-time, and Claudia was supposed to be friend of, and because they said that Demetria wasn't really bringing it, also because Demetria's boyfriend Roger Bob refused to film, that's when they decided to switch at the last minute and make her a friend of, and make Claudia full-time. Carlos King goes on to say that NeNe actually respected Claudia for standing up to her and giving it to her, despite what people think. And she really actually liked Claudia being on the show, and she thought that Claudia made for great TV. You see how there's such a weird relationship on these shows? These women might not like each other. They know that in order for one of these shows to be a success, you need to have some sort of drama. And they'll even be like, you know what, I hate that bitch, but I still want her on the show because she makes for good TV, so keep her. It's just a very interesting mindset that these women get into. It's just it's fascinating. Like, I think that there needs to be like a study done on what happens to your brain when you're on reality TV. But I digress. And because they ended up bumping Claudia up to a full-time castmate in the middle of the season, her storyline felt rushed, and they had to scramble to get her storyline and her tagline together, and that's why she only got one season, because viewers couldn't connect with her. Andy goes on to say that Claudia didn't get a fair shake, and he actually would have liked for her to have come back for another season. One of the best parts in this entire chapter is the whole mess of season 9 with Phaedra, Portia, and Kandi and those awful rumors. So first things first, Andy Cohen and all the rest of the producers clear up the biggest misconception that Carlos King was fired. They all say that Carlos King was not fired. They love Carlos, and Carlos was already planning to leave the show that year for other opportunities. So that wasn't the reason why, and he had nothing to do with the rumor. Andy Cohen lets it be known that he loved Phaedra. He thought that she was one of the funniest housewives besides NeNe, and he was really upset when they had to make the choice to let her go. He says that at that season 9 reunion, he was trying to give Phaedra every sort of lifeline to apologize, and she just refused to apologize, and that's when he knew that she could not come back. Kandi says in the book that if Phaedra ever comes back, she will be saying shout out to everybody, she had fun.
Oh! Shout out to everybody, I had fun.
I gotta be good.
She never wants to see Phaedra ever again, and she has made that very clear to the network that she will walk if they do bring Phaedra back on. Me personally, I never liked Phaedra. I thought she was very nasty personality. I've heard quite a few people say that they've met her, and she's only nice to you if you're famous or if you have a lot of money. And if you're just a regular fan, she just can't be bothered. The Atlanta chapter closes out with all the ladies, including Andy, discussing NeNe's final departure after season 13, and Andy discussing the fact that he and NeNe are no longer friends and how upset he is by it because he considered her to be a good friend as well. He really liked her a lot, and he feels like she brought so many laughs, and he says that she is still the funniest housewife. Like, he just loved her. So to see that they no longer have a relationship anymore, it's very heartbreaking. And I mean, the way that NeNe accused him of drugs and trying to sue the network, you can't blame him for not wanting to ever speak to her again, because, I mean, who would? But again, these women love Andy when they're on top. They love him when he's signing those checks. They love him when he's signing those contracts for the next season. But the minute he says, I want to reduce your role, I don't think that you should come back this season, then he's just the devil. It's a mess. But Atlanta, in my opinion, is the most iconic franchise to me. I'm not just saying that because it's a black franchise. I'm saying it because it's the truth. They even say in the book how they were the highest rated franchise for years. And I mean, the ratings were through the roof, like, 3 and 4 million a week. I mean, they were really giving what the other girls were supposed to have gave. So you cannot deny that RHOA really had an impact on the culture. And NeNe Leakes especially is definitely up there in the Hall of Fame of one of the best reality stars to ever do it. We move on to the next chapter, and that is New Jersey. And Jersey is definitely in my top 3 of best franchises. They had one of the best first seasons of all time. That finale was everything and then some. But Jersey premiered in May of 2009, and all the producers and Andy loved the fact that it was a family element. Like, everybody was either related. Caroline and Dina were sisters, married to 2 brothers, and he just loved the whole thing. Obviously, Teresa was the breakout star, and that iconic table flip was just everything. The book reveals that that's one of the highest rated finales of all time across all the franchises, and Carlos King is very instrumental in that whole entire scene happening, because not only was he a producer on Jersey, but he was assigned to Danielle, and he was the one who brought that book about Danielle, and he ran under the table, slipped the book to Danielle, and she puts it on the table, and that's when all hell breaks loose, and that's when we get the infamous table flip. So thank you, Carlos King. Carlos King needs to get his flowers because he has really produced so much amazing and iconic television. I'm not going to hold you. Jersey is definitely one of the longest chapters in this book, and I don't want this recap to go on too long, so I'm going to keep this real brief. This chapter definitely touches on Teresa and Joe's legal woes, them both going to jail. Teresa believes in her heart that all of the ladies on that cast had something to do with her and Joe going to jail. She believes that Caroline and Jacqueline played a part in it. A very juicy chapter, but a very lengthy chapter, okay? So grab your snacks when you read Jersey. Now we move on to a chapter that's about a minute long. It was only 3 pages. Real Housewives of DC. Ciao. It was grand opening, grand closing. The Salahis pretty much got the franchise canceled when they crashed that state dinner with President Obama. And because the FBI came knocking on Bravo's door, Bravo said, shout out to everybody, I had fun. Absolutely not. But that was the reason why DC ended. And yeah, there wasn't much to say about the DC chapter, so we can just move right on along. We move on to the next chapter, Beverly Hills, and Beverly Hills has always been a favorite of mine. We learned that Andy and the producers weren't that excited or on board with Beverly Hills being a franchise because of OC. But then everybody said that OC and Beverly Hills are completely different. It's like night and day. So that's why they're like, okay, let's just think about it. We learned that Lisa Rinna auditioned to be on the show season 1. Andy was like, I love you, Rinna, but I don't want any actresses on the show. I want either like washed up stars or I want women married to rich and famous men. One of the producers was watching Paris Hilton's E! True Hollywood Story. I used to love some E! True Hollywood Story, okay? Like, that was a favorite of mine, and I watched hers too, but I digress. One of the producers was watching her E! True Hollywood Story, and they saw Kyle Richards in there, and they said, let's have her on the show. I think she would be a great fit because she's not a big-time star. She's fame adjacent, and she used to be a child star. I think she'd be great. Of course, we know that Lisa Vanderpump is that girl of Beverly Hills, Andy Cohen loved her when he laid eyes on her, and he says that she reminded him of Jackie and Joan Collins. So he was like, she's a shoo-in, like everything. They do discuss a lot of what Taylor Armstrong was going through when she was on the show, seasons 1 through 3. Remember how she was in an awful marriage, and the whole thing that happened with Russell, he took his life, and he was just awful to her as a husband. But she discusses that, what she was going through behind the scenes, and how she was scared for her own life when Camille had revealed what was really going on behind the scenes to all of them. The chapter discusses how when Brandi Glanville came on the scene and she exposed the fact that Adrienne had used a surrogate to carry all of her children, and nobody had known that except for obviously Adrienne, her husband, and a few family friends. And when Brandi revealed that on the show, that was a really scary thing for production and the network, because Adrienne was threatening to bring in legal action. And if you remember, when that secret was revealed, Adrienne had that blurred out, so nobody knew what she was talking about. But this chapter highlights how evil Brandi is. That is definitely a hated housewife. And she is somebody who she really kind of revels in doing whatever she needs to do to get a check. And it's really sad because in the chapter, she doesn't seem to be very remorseful about her actions. It's just a lot of, well, you know, I did what I had to do to get that check, so I really don't care. Like, yeah, I was an asshole, but it was what it was. Just very pathetic. We also find out that Beverly Hills had knocked on Garcelle Bouvet's door years before when her boys were really small, and she had turned them down. And then when they came knocking around again, she said absolutely. Andy Cohen reveals that he always loved Garcelle Bouvet. He thought that her rise to fame in Hollywood was very interesting. He loved her story, and he was here for her. The ladies discussed the season when Lisa Vanderpump quit the show, and in the book, it is evident that there's still a lot of hurt feelings on Lisa Vanderpump's part, and I would feel the same way because the way those ladies did her was dead-ass wrong. But all the ladies, Kyle, Erica, Lisa Rinna, Dorit, they all say in the book that they received so much hate from viewers and how they were really rocked by it. I don't feel bad for the 4 of them receiving all that hate because, again, I did not like the way they did Lisa Vanderpump. I thought it was dead-ass wrong. The Beverly Hills chapter was absolutely amazing. Very lengthy, though, but very entertaining. For the sake of time, I'm not trying to keep y'all here all day, so we're going to move right on along to the next chapter, and that was Real Housewives of Miami, which premiered in February of 2011. Now, as we all know, that they have brought Miami back on Peacock, and this season is so far so good, okay? So check it out if you're not watching, and I'm also reviewing Miami as well. But anyway, Miami was a very short chapter because we all know that they had went on hiatus after season 3. Miami was originally supposed to be called Socialites of Miami, and then at the last minute, Bravo decided to change them to a Real Housewives franchise. We can skip past the Miami chapter. It was only a few pages long. So now, honey, we move on to the girls of Potomac, child. And we remember how Potomac dropped in 2016, and they have been gracing our screens and annoying the hell out of us ever since, okay? Charisse is the one who put this cast together, and she already knew that it was going to be an uphill battle because they're not like us in New York or the girls in LA who like all that fame and all that fanfare. Like, you know, it's very conservative in the DMV. A fun fact, they were thinking about calling Potomac the Real Housewives of Montgomery County. Charisse says that since she was the president of the NBA Wives Association, she had a whole lot of contacts and connections, and she called Giselle's line first because she knew that Giselle would be a great addition to the show, and she knew that Giselle would say yes. Charisse says that the producers told her that they did not want a replica of Atlanta. They wanted this to be the black version of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
You know what? This is too much.
I'm not going to hold you. I found Potomac to be one of the best chapters in this book. Like, I was glued to every page, and you know I got pissed off towards the end when they had to discuss season 5 and that horrific fight, but let me not get my blood pressure all up, okay? We're gonna get to that in just a minute. Ashley says that production wasn't that sure about the show during that first season, even though the ratings were pretty good, and all the ladies spill some tea that the Atlanta girls didn't show them any love because Potomac and Atlanta share the same production company. The production company would ask the Atlanta ladies to promote Potomac on their Twitters and Instagrams, and the girls paid them dust. We get to some of the drama with Giselle and Monique. When Monique joined the cast, Giselle said that they cut it to look like she was jealous of Monique when that wasn't the case at all. She says that, she thought that Monique was pretty cool. Obviously, they didn't hit it off in the beginning, but she didn't have a problem with her in season 2. She says that she hates Monique now, but I mean, we knew that. Giselle also reveals that she thought that Monique was a try-hard. Charisse says that Monique thinks that everybody is jealous of her and nobody wants her life. All the other ladies say in this chapter that Charisse, Karen, and Giselle were all fighting to be the queen bee of this show in the earlier seasons. And you could see it because there was that power struggle between Charisse and Karen, then Charisse and Giselle, then Giselle versus Karen. It was just a mess. And Katie spilled some tea that in that first season, Karen was very insecure about her being the oldest on the show. And on top of that, she was taping her wigs to pull her face up to make it look younger. They bring up the infamous butter knife situation at Candace's house, and Monique has the nerve to say that that incident was when she officially started feeling unsafe around Candace. I said, Monique, that is absolute BS and you know it. All the ladies say that that night with the butter knife incident, they were actually surprised that things escalated between Candace and Ashley because they were there to discuss what Michael said about Juan, how he wanted to perform a service on Juan. Yeah, they were there to talk about that. So when Candace and Ashley started arguing, they were all shocked. They bring up Michael and the ass grabbing. Andy Cohen says that he was shocked because Michael reminded him of how he had grabbed Andy's behind in earlier seasons. So Andy says that I forgot all about that incident. Candace reveals that Michael had grabbed 2 other producers' butts as well, and how he just can't help himself. Giselle is sitting up here defending Michael, talking about Michael's a wild card, how she likes Michael, and how he makes for great TV. They discuss Wendy joining the cast. Candace was super excited, and Wendy and Candace had known each other prior to the show. They had traveled in similar political circles, and they had done a few charity events together. Candace says that when it came to season 5, she was iced out by 90% of the group because Giselle, Robin, Ashley were all angry at her. So now we discuss the fight. Monique is still lying and taking zero accountability for what happened. She is still lying and saying that Candace put her hand in her face. Monique, for the last time, we all saw the footage and that did not happen. You started this entire thing. For the last time, Candace did not touch you. She did not hit you first. So for you to still lie in this book, I said this is a damn shame that you still won't even tell the truth. You still won't even show any remorse for what you did. Giselle says that she and the rest of the group would have forgiven Monique had Monique just apologized and shown some remorse. But she couldn't do it, and she can't forgive Monique. Andy Cohen says that when production called him and told him about the fight, he says that he was pissed. He says this is not Bad Girls Club, this is not Love and Hip Hop, but we don't do this over here. And of course, Bravo prides themselves on being the high-class, highbrow channel. Leave all the other ratchet stuff somewhere else, not here. They now discuss how Monique was leaking information to the blogs. Monique's sitting up there denying it. One of the producers calls Monique out about that lie. They said that Monique was leaking information to the press. And on top of that, one of the producers says that Monique is very fame hungry and very fame obsessed, and she is addicted to being on this show. Monique goes on to say how she wasn't penalized for what she did. And then one of the producers says Monique was kept at arm's length from everybody after the incident. So you see the contradictions, a mess. Candace says that she felt like Bravo does not give a flying F about her, and how she reached out to Andy repeatedly after the fight happened, and Andy never called her back. She goes on to say how the next time she saw Andy, she told him off to his face. So now Andy says he is aware that Candace called his office, and she was in contact with several of his assistants. He says that had he known that she was trying to get in contact with him directly, he would have called her back. Then he goes on to say how he does not have any recollection of Candace telling him off, and if she did do that, he would have remembered that. Now, I feel like, Candace, if you really did tell Andy off to his face, I feel like you would have been let go too, or you would have been demoted to friend of. I just feel like maybe you told off one of his assistants, or you dreamt about telling him off, but I don't really know if you told him off. But it's clear that they can't agree on what really happened about the communication between her and Andy when the fight went down. Andy says that since Bravo does not condone, they don't like physical violence on their shows, the only reason why they show the footage of the fight so that the viewers can see for themselves and make an assessment about what really happened. And thank God Andy and the good folks at Bravo did that, because we all saw the truth of what really happened and not what Monique said happened. One of the producers says that they did offer Monique a spot to return to season 6 because they wanted to see if she would show remorse for what she did, and they also wanted to see if she could make amends with Candace, because it was sort of like the Phaedra and Candy situation all over again. Candace says that she had told the network that if Monique came on the show, she would never film again, and she was going to quit. So it just wasn't going to happen. And Monique fans, don't come in these comments acting crazy. I'm just giving my opinion, and I'm talking about what they all said in the book, okay? Monique isn't remorseful at all. One of her last quips in the book is, you know, at the end of the day, some people are going to like me, some people are going to dislike me, some folks are going to say that I was wrong, other folks are going to say I was right. Like, it is what it is. We all have crazy moments. I said, just a mess. But the Potomac chapter ends with Andy saying that the Potomac cast is a dream, and Giselle wants to have another third Black franchise come in the mix, preferably Chicago. So the book ends with Dallas, and Dallas has never been a favorite of mine, but I just watched it. It's a very short chapter too. I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to spend too much time on Dallas. But we find out that Brandy and Stephanie were approached for a Bravo show years ago when their kids were babies. Andy reveals that Bravo was scouting for a Dallas and Houston cast years ago, but he scrapped it because it just didn't feel right. But now he kept hearing so much about Dallas, he decided to try again. Andy says that he liked Brandy right away. He liked her sense of humor. He liked the fact that she was a redhead, and it was like love at first sight. Producers say that they could already feel the insecurity on Leanne's part, her feeling like she wasn't good enough because she wasn't rich. They could sense that when she was doing her audition. They do discuss Leanne's racist remarks about Carrie being Mexican. And I mean, when I tell you, you want to talk about somebody else who is very delusional, that is Leanne. Leanne is still not taking accountability for what she said. She was dead ass wrong, and I'm so glad that Bravo fired her. One of the producers reveals that the execs actually hated Leanne, and a good chunk of them did not want her to return after season 1. But Andy kept, pulling for her because she brought all the drama. But when she exhibited all that racism in season 4, it was like, okay, she's got to go for real. Like, we can't have this. All the ladies are torn about if they think Leanne is racist or not. Carrie thinks that she is racist, and then the other ladies think that she just made a very awful mistake. I always thought that Leanne was a desperate wannabe who wanted to be rich and famous by any means, and she just didn't have it. The way she was so jealous of all the women on that cast because she was the only broke one, it was very pathetic to watch. I was glad when Andy fired her. She showed her entire racist behind, and I believe that she is a racist. That was the Dallas chapter, and that was the book. That was my recap. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments. And as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all later. Bye.